I just finished my essay and I came out to celebrate. I wanted to go out and grab something to eat. I bumped into an old friend of mine, so I got into the back of his car and we just started chatting. He wanted to pick up some money from the cash machine, and the next thing, I've been dragged out of the car by a police officer. I'm scared and I'm in shock. I'm really trying to gather my thoughts as to what have I done to deserve this? Why am I being dehumanized like this?
Get up, man! No, you're arresting her and you're hitting her as well. That's not
I saw him, yeah.
I saw you slapping her.
My vision is blurring, shapes are becoming like different colors. I just remember things turning like they looked a bit radioactive to me because I couldn't. I knew that I was losing consciousness, and I had to beg to God that this will not be the last place. This will not be the last place that my father will hear about me. He cannot be watching me and seeing this and seeing that these will be the last words of his daughter.
On the 9th of May this year, during the national lockdown, a police traffic stop in southeast London led to this.
Always black people. She's saying she can't breathe.
Yeah,
this is wrong, man. This is wrong.
This student in her early 20s was caught up in an incident in which the man she was with was pulled over by the police for driving erratically. He was arrested and later convicted of drunk driving. She has asked that we protect her identity. Our understanding is that 4 officers from the Metropolitan Police admit punching her, 3 repeatedly, and 1 officer also admits kicking her. The police say she was resisting being handcuffed and searched.
As a female civilian, to have 6, 7, 8 officers on you, this has happened to somebody else, and it took just one person. It took just one person to take their life.
With use of force by police towards black people under scrutiny worldwide, these scenes raise further questions.
Having a male officer using all his body weight, burying his knee into my neck and using all the power within him to try cut off my air supply. I remember asking the female officer who punched me several times, I told her, I was like, that male officer, my exact words were like, he's killing me. And I remember seeing a smirk on her face, and her exact response was that, if you can talk, you can breathe. At this point, I know that these people are not here to help me. And my question is, how am I going to get out of this situation alive and unharmed? They then picked me up with my hair, like with my braids, which they eventually tore out from my scalp because of my body weight.
This arrest was officially recorded by the police as a use of force incident, defined as anything from handcuffing at one end of the spectrum through various types of restraint, use of police dogs, batons, incapacitant spray, hitting or striking, right through to taser and firearms. While use of force incidents are common, the level of force used during this arrest and the number of officers applying it is unusual. It's significant that this incident happened in May, when the whole country was in full lockdown, a time one might expect the deployment of force by the police towards the general public would be less prevalent. In fact, figures show just the opposite. There was a rise in use of force during this period. Newsnight has obtained use of force data from 37 out of the 44 police forces in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. During the lockdown months of April and May, 27 out of the 37 police forces saw a rise in use of force compared to the same months last year. The Metropolitan Police, which is the biggest police force in the country, saw a rise of 26%. Greater Manchester 40%, Gloucestershire 67%, Cleveland 64%, Derbyshire 38%. The police say this is because calls to them and demand went down in the lockdown period.
Crime has fallen during the lockdown period, and because of that fall in crime, COVID has provided time and space for the police to undertake more proactive policing operations, particularly around drugs and particularly around county lines activity. And if you do proactive operations of that kind, you'll end up doing a lot more enforcement, making a lot more arrests, and in particular in London, doing a lot of stop and search. And that's why I think the use of force has increased over this period.
The National Police Chiefs Council agrees an uptick in proactive policing saw a rise in use of force, which includes handcuffing and restraint tactics. They said the rise was due also to a notable increase in assaults against emergency services workers since the beginning of the pandemic. They added that force was rarely used, but where it was, most forms of restraint involved the use of handcuffs. Home Office figures in England and Wales show that black people are disproportionately impacted by use of force. They're approximately 6 times more likely to be subjected to force than white people. This disparity does not apply to other ethnic minorities.
There is disproportionality. I don't think no one would deny that. The police themselves wouldn't deny that. The key question is, what is the cause of that disproportionality? And there's a number of potential reasons for it. One might be that there's bias on behalf of police officers. In a minority of cases, I think a very small minority of cases, it may be, racism, for example. In any organisation, there'll be people who have racist views, and the police would be no different. But I think that would be a very small minority. The other potential explanation is that the police focus on particular types of crime, and they focus on particular areas when they're doing this kind of enforcement activity. And there will be more young black people, for example, on the street in those areas.
The level of force used against this black woman undoubtedly raises serious questions, as does what she says happened to her while she was in custody here at Lewisham Police Station.
They didn't even tell me they were going to strip search me. It literally just happened when in the presence of the male and the female officers, with my cell door wide open so people were passing. They cut my jeans, they cut my underwear, they cut my bra. Why would you want to cut my bra? I thought this was just them trying to humiliate me more, to dehumanize me even more. Even though I had offered several times to take off my clothes, they literally stripped me naked. And the same officer that had had his knee buried into my neck came back while I was fully unclothed. And there were other male officers holding parts of my body.
Male officers should not be present in the strip search of a woman. What happened during this strip search is against regulations. A recent stomach operation meant that she was worried about the pressure applied to her by the police holding her down, and she says that this was why she resisted.
I was pinned down again, I'll say about 5, 6, 7 officers. I couldn't breathe. I kept begging them to stop. It was the same officer that was punching me outside of the restaurant who still went on to punch me while I was fully unclothed and restrained for no justifiable reason. She just hit me about, I say, maybe 8 times.
How hard did she punch you?
Very, very hard. Very, 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 very hard. There was a lot of intensity in her, and I don't know why.
The initial allegations against her of assaulting a police officer and possession of cannabis have been dropped, as has the charge of obstructing a drug search. The police have not apologised for the way she was treated. Her experience has changed her perception of the police.
I'm scared of the police, and I shouldn't be, but it's my natural reaction now.
Do you think it's a case that these were just a few bad officers, or do you think there is actually institutional racism in the Met?
Both. I feel like there's definitely institutional racism. You know, there's good and bad people everywhere. You can't just sweep a few bad apples under the rug. It's a representation of everyone. The Met Police has to have a total reform on these sorts of cases and people of colour, because it's increasingly obvious that there is a problem there.
The Metropolitan Police told us that 8 officers involved in these incidents are being investigated by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. 2 of the officers have been placed on restricted duties pending investigation. The probe will rule whether officers acted within the bounds of acceptable use of force or beyond, and look into their conduct of the strip search. Beyond this case, the rise in use of force incidents during lockdown tells a story of its own. As questions over race relations and policing persist, some are asking what can be done to prevent some communities being unfairly targeted.
Caroline Turriff with that report. And in response to our story, the Metropolitan Police told us all police officers are fully aware that they'll be asked to account for their actions, and the Met continues to cooperate with the IOPC's investigation team to ensure that all the facts are established. 8 officers are under investigation in relation to this incident, 2 of whom have been placed on restricted duties. The IOPC said use of force is an essential policing tool. Like all police powers, must be used properly, proportionately and responsibly. We're examining the circumstances of the woman's arrest and the use of force on her. Our investigation's also looking at the woman's subsequent treatment in custody. They added, to uphold public confidence in the police complaint system, we're investigating the use of stop and search tactics in this incident and whether the actions of those officers were appropriate and proportionate and followed approved police policies. We're also investigating if racial profiling or discrimination played a part in the incident. With regards to the rise of use of force, the Home Office told us we're clear that all use of force must be reasonable, proportionate and necessary. No one should be subject to it based on their race or ethnicity.